Hello, and welcome back to the F1 World Podcast. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are doing our F1 2023 awards. So, we've got quite a few awards with lots of different categories to go through, and we've decided who's going to win them and talk them through. So, do you want to start? Should we go
Yeah.
with the first one?
So our first award is for best qualifier. And I think this was a pretty easy decision for both of us because, well, yeah, we just gave it to Max because who else are we going to give it to?
Yeah,
He's been immense this year, hasn't he? So
yeah. It's most probably been like one of the best seasons by an F1 driver in history. So, as much as we think it was a bit boring, you can't
mhm.
take that away from Max. Good qualifier, good racer, I guess in general, and there was really no one else we could give it to because Max was Max.
Mhm.
Um, our next one is the most improved driver from last season. Um, we had a few, I'd say, but I think the driver that came out on top for us was Yuki Tsunoda. Um, with the fact of him being having that extra year in Formula One, that experience, he's calmed down a lot through the radio. And obviously he's had three teammates this year, which must have been hard for him mentally as well. And he's still done the best he could. And personally, I don't think many drivers could have done as well as he done in those circumstances.
Yeah, you got to think as well at the end of the year he led the bleeding Grand Prix, didn't he? So
Yeah,
I do think he's understood the car a lot more, which is very good for him and his campaign he tried making to a helmet, wasn't it?
yeah,
So switching it, the next award is for biggest flop, and there was only two people that we could think of to be in this, and we went for Nick De Vries as he only lasted half a season.
yeah.
We saw what he was like in Monza last year, and we thought he's going to be such a great addition, and it just never worked out, did it?
No, sadly, like obviously, I think Logan Sargent was our other one, but
Yeah,
with the fact that he lasted the entire season and got a contract for next year, I think if we're talking about full-time drivers, I think he would have won it.
yeah,
But obviously, with the circumstances, Nick De Vries, let's be honest, I'm not meaning this in a harsh way. I don't think he's cut out for a full season of Formula One.
no,
Um, so our next award was for overtake of the year. Um, there was two contenders, but eventually we decided to go for Charles in Las Vegas with his overtake on Perez in the last corner on the last lap to take,
hmm
is it P2?
Me too, yeah,
Um, I mean that was one of the overtakes that stuck out for me the most, really.
yeah,
Not just being a Charles fan, but I think if that was any other driver, it'd still be the same.
yeah.
Um, our other one was Fernando on Checo, Brazil. Is it Brazil?
Yes, it was, yeah, yeah,
Um, but obviously we decided against that because it was a good battle, but it wasn't really an overtake. It was like to the line, wasn't it? It wasn't really.
yeah. And I felt like we went for this one because Charles made it stick, and we wasn't quite sure. And I don't think Fernando made it stick. Oh no, wait, was it? No, I think it was Checo on Fernando, wasn't it? Because it kept going on for a couple of laps, and then into the final corner, Fernando.
Yeah, Fernando went
Oh, I
wide,
can't
didn't he?
remember.
I'm sure Fernando went wide, and then Checo was behind him, and it was a drag race to the line.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. And I think we felt like Charles made it stick a bit more, didn't we?
Yeah.
Which is why we went for
Yeah.
Charles. It's my turn, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on. So the next award is for the worst race, and I love this track. I'm not sure about you, but the only reason why we went for this is because we forgot about it basically. And I'm pretty sure in earlier episodes of the podcast we said how disappointing this race was. So we went for Azerbaijan this year, and it was a sprint race, and we just didn't get what we normally get from Baku when we were quite disappointed.
Yeah. Like, no offense, thinking back, I can't really remember.
No, neither can I.
Really, I think one thing I remember is I don't know whether this was last year. Was it like Yuki and Carlos went off in the first in the one of the corners in qualifying? I don't know whether that was it or not. I think, and then he gave
I think
Charles
it
a
was this
pole.
year.
But I think that's the one thing I remember from
Hmm.
because I just and I'm the same as you. I love Baku. I think it's one of the best streets circuits like
Hmm.
in a long time, and it just wasn't. Every now and again, every track got to have a bad race.
Hmm.
But our next award, which leads on, is the best race of the season. There was quite a few contenders for this, but eventually we did decide it would be Singapore. Um, Not only the fact that it was a non-Red Bull win, the
Hmm.
battle for the lead towards the end, obviously, and then George crashing out and watching Max and Checo fight through the pack. Um, there was a lot that went on in that race. I think that made it, and as we were saying, it's one of the only races that we was like on the edge of our seats for because it was such
Yeah.
a thrilling end. I think some of the others were like Australia, that was quite manic. Um, Las Vegas was a decent race after all the drama, but obviously, and then
Yeah.
but like Silverstone and Zandvoort with Lando taking the lead and the rain. But overall, we decided to go for
Yeah.
Singapore.
I think it was because we were saying, weren't we, that it was the race where we spent most of our time sat on the edge of our chairs, like
Yeah,
with what was going on. So it was like, I think it was I think we got the most out of it because I think in qualifying as well, quali was really, really good.
yeah,
And then we had the whole Lando and Carlos with the DRS, George and Lewis trying to catch up on fresh tyres, George going into the wall. It was just, well, it was such a good race. But our next award is for the most meme-worthy race, and I think there was only a couple of contenders for this because you can't not think of memes and not think of Vegas. So we went with Vegas in the end. But I remember waking up like the morning, it must have been the Friday morning after the opening ceremony, and I was scrolling through TikTok and Twitter, and I was like, I'm so glad I did not stay up for this because
yeah.
this is just horrific, but
It
it's
was,
funny at the same time.
yeah. And like, you can't obviously forget about the when they all thought they were going to the podium in the car, and then they went and they were all like, I think Max really made that as he was like, oh, they're taking us straight to the club, and they went there and they all got interviewed and they were like, right, where's our trophies? And they were like, no, you gotta get back in the car. That was just a water show. And they were all like, and Checo's face as well during the entirety of that car ride was,
Yeah,
it's just, yeah. Obviously, Miami was a contender for the in the what should we call it? The introduction of the drivers on Sunday
yeah.
with Will I
The
Am.
driver walk, something like
That
that.
was cringy. But yeah, so moving on from that, we our next one is best driver of the year. So obviously not necessarily, back of the field to P1 or P, like a dominating race. We chose Lando at Mexico. I think he got knocked out in Q1, didn't he? And then in the race, he finished P5 with a lot of different tire compounds. And that was one that really stuck out, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, because he dropped back after. There was a red flag, wasn't there, at Mexico? Am I got?
I
I
think
think there was, wasn't there?
so. Yeah.
Yeah, because he dropped back after the first start and went even further back. Then there was the red flag, and then once it restarted, he dropped even further back, and then just went on this crazy madman fueled whatever it was, and just got past anyone and everyone that was in front of him until the time was up, which was probably the most fun we've had watching. Not most fun, but like it was fun to watch the pundits go back and cover his
Yeah.
overtakes, wasn't it? Um,
Yeah.
which then, speaking of pundits, leads on to our next award, which is the most entertaining pundit. And we were sat having a conversation about this one for probably about 5-10 minutes, wasn't it? 'Cause it took quite a while to
Yeah.
decide. And it was between Ted and his notebook or Martin and his grid walk. And I feel like the ones I remember the most, the ones that we remembered the most were Ted and his notebook. I know not many people watch it, but there's always something so funny to see on TikTok or Twitter the day after.
Yeah.
Um, so we went with Ted at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think I remember one, it was Las Vegas, I don't know whether it was qualifying or the race, but he was standing there and he was, I don't know what he was talking about. I think he was talking about Charles and Carlos's girlfriends. He went to turn around and talk to them and they turned their backs on him and he made a funny comment. And it was just, that was one of the moments that just, and the way he just goes up to everybody and anybody and just sticks his mic there and be like,
Yeah,
talk. It's, it was, yeah, I definitely
yeah,
say. Martin had his moments on the grid walk
yeah. I
too,
think
but
I think for me the most memorable thing for Ted was him going down the backwards escalators at Miami.
yeah, I
That was
remember that.
probably what um chose made me choose Ted more than Martin.
Yeah. Um, our
It
next
was quite
award
funny.
does lead on from this. So our best commentary line. Um, I mean they were one or two. Obviously we haven't had many really exciting moments, a bit like last year. But we've decided to go for David Croft, and he said, "I've been going through Taylor Swift's greatest hits." Obviously, at this time, it was funny because Fernando Alonso was rumored to be dating Taylor Swift, and he didn't really address those rumors. He just played along with it, and obviously at that time, it was like such a big thing in the F1 world and on Twitter, and Crofty bringing that line out was just, yeah,
Yeah, because he did have a couple more Taylor Swift references, didn't he, in the practice sessions?
he did a lot stuff, and
Yeah,
let's be honest, I think he made that all the Taylor Swift because obviously only people with Sky Sports could hear it, but it was the stuff he said went right the way through Twitter and TikTok and stuff.
yeah. Speaking of like Twitter moments and stuff like that, so we thought of this award, and this award is the moment to be twisted the most in Drive to Survive. So we all know that Drive to Survive is very dramatic, and half of what we hear from that is not real. They just make it seem real for entertainment purposes. So we took a while to decide this one because there was quite a few that we thought are going to be twisted, and in the end we chose that Lando and Oscar's friendship, especially in Qatar, are going to be the most twisted thing. Obviously, with Oscar winning the sprint and Lando not winning a race yet, so we think that's going to be the most twisted thing in Drive to Survive, and I feel like they're going to get a whole episode out of it because they're going to use because Lando's been quite what's the word? I don't know what word I'm looking for. It's been a bit dramatic on the radio this year.
Yeah.
We could say that. And we think a lot of the stuff that he's said about himself, because he's been very strict with himself this year, hasn't he?
Yeah.
We think a lot of the stuff that is said that he's said about himself is going to be used within the coverage that they might use in Qatar.
Yeah.
Like the first thing that pops into my head is him calling himself shit in Qatar. I don't think it was in Qatar. It was in a different one. But he got on the radio and called himself all the names under the sun, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be used.
Is it Qatar qualifying? Because
It might have been.
Because he got track limits, didn't he?
It was either that or Mexico.
Yeah, one of those.
It was somewhere around there, wasn't it?
Yeah, because obviously, and I think they're gonna build it up even more. The fact that Oscar won a race. Obviously, they don't class it as a race, but he's won a sprint, so he's got his first win technically before Lando, and I think that Netflix are gonna really build on that and not necessarily put a strain on their relationship in person, but they're gonna make it think that they're enemies like they did with Lando and Daniel last year, because that's Netflix for you.
Yeah.
Our next award is for meme worthy driver. I'd say there was one or two, quite a few of them that could be, but in the end, we decided to go for Alonso. I think what really made him win this award was his TikToks. He started it at the beginning of the season, and I think if that was any other driver, it wouldn't be as funny. Fernando being Fernando, and all the different memes that were created from his TikToks were just, yeah, they just spread like so quickly through like TikTok, Twitter, and stuff. But obviously, we did talk about George Russell and his little driver parades moment. The little like look back at, was it America when he looked back?
I think it was, yeah.
And then him coming through the shot in, was it Brazil, of him coming through the first corner, and they were trying to show, I think they were showing Charles, and he's just sat there with his knee up and his arm out. And if I can find the photos of there, well, I'll check them on. But yeah, but overall, we decided that Fernando was the most meme worthy driver, and we're going to class him as the entertainment king because he really
Yes,
did this year.
he will be known as the entertainment king for this year.
Um,
Our next award is the funniest off-track moment, and we were stuck on this one because there's been a lot, and there were a few suggestions thrown around, but I think we both agreed that the most memorable, funniest off-track moment is everything post-quali at Qatar, because we had the track limits for both Lando and Oscar. We have George's face when he found out that Lando wasn't being interviewed, and it was Oscar showing up instead. We had Oscar finding out that he broke track limits in his interview and was dropping down to P6. It was just chaotic, but it was a really funny chaotic thing.
Yeah, and the way that obviously they couldn't get it sorted out in time, so like seeing the drivers' actual reactions
Mm-hmm.
to it all like popping up on the screen, because I remember they popped up Oscars and I was like, oh my god, he's gonna drop down to P6 and he's being interviewed. And then I don't know who was interviewing him, and they were like, "Oh, Oscar, we've just started through that you've lost your track time," and his face goes, "Oh, right, okay," and he just didn't know what to do, and it was, but all of that, like 5-10 minutes, was the funniest thing. Like you said, George's
Yeah.
face when he found out it was in Lando, and yeah, that was just. Obviously, we did have a few others of the Charles and Carlos moment when they were wearing their upside down goggles. They were
Yeah.
quite funny. Um, but obviously, I don't know whether many people would remember that as much as the guitar. So we decided more on the guitar. Our final award for our F1 2023 season awards is our favourite moment of the year. There were a few contenders for this, but eventually we decided on Lando taking the lead at the British Grand Prix. I can't vouch for what everyone else that wasn't there, but being there at that moment, and obviously I was on the national pit straight, the old start finish straight. I was sat there, so obviously there's a delay, so we couldn't see what was going on, and you could just hear the screams from the start finish line in the first corners. You and Lando take the lead, and it was just the atmosphere at that point. And then when he came around leading that first lap, and every single grandstand he went past, you could just hear everyone screaming. Um, so yeah, I think that was our moment of the year, but we did have quite a few others. I think it was obviously the battle for the lead in Singapore was one.
Yeah.
I think that was edge of the seat moment of the year. um, and obviously Oscar's first win technically. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, overall we decided that it would be Lando taking the lead at Silverstone, which he did say would be, one of his things to do at Silverstone, and he's done it. So
Yeah.
that
It
was
was it was good.
it was obviously I can't vouch for anything that happened at Singapore, whether the atmosphere was really good there, but I think just being there was it was a bit of a blur, to be honest.
Mm.
But yeah, but that's all of our awards done for the year. Any last words before we wrap it up?
I can't wait for Drive to Survive now.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be obviously we'll see if that Lando Oscar moment comes through. More than likely with Netflix, it will.
Well.
Can't wait for Drive to Survive. Can't wait for the beginning of the season.
Mm.
Feel like it's going slow and fast at the same time
Yeah.
because it's like 74, 73 days, which seems like a long time. But in the meantime, we will be having a nice little lovely Christmas break, and back in the new year, you will see us for a lot more exciting content. So yeah, we hope you've enjoyed our little different podcast, and we hope you have a lovely Christmas and a happy new year.